Hi, BD friends. I wanted to tell you a little bit about the double CRAW stitch that I published this week in a little free pattern. As often, also this stitch appeared when I was playing around with beads. And then you have something in your hands and you start thinking, okay, did I see this before somewhere? Did someone do this before somehow? As there is an old rule in medicine, you don't have to know everything, you just have to know where it's written or whom you can ask for. I was asking my friend Martina Nagele, she's a walking dictionary when it comes to beading stitches. So she told me, have a look, Gwen Fisher did something that is called Super Raw, which is kind of a flat version of the stitch I wanted to show you now. So I contacted Gwen. And then Gwen said to me, okay, that she was working on a Super Raw and also on the 3-dimensional version of it, but never published anything about it. So she said, go for it, and here we go. But first of all, I want to show you this stitch again, that you see it also here in the little video. First, you string 4 beads and make them a ring. Then you always string 1 bead in a second color. We call these beads edge beads, and put them in between the 4 core beads you made in the first step. There's 1 bead after each of them. In the end, you will exit from one of these edge beads. Again, we string 4 core beads and pass another time through the bead where you were exiting from. Then we pass again through the 4 core beads and fill 1 edge bead in each of the gaps between the 4 core beads. In position 1, 2, and 3. And in the last position, you will see there is already an edge bead. We have now 2 walls finished. The first one is the floor, the second one is the first wall. We now proceed into the next edge bead of the floor. Also here we string 4 core beads, pass again through the bead where you were exiting from, and then we add in the first 2 gaps each 1 edge bead in between the core beads. In the last position, we will go through the adjacent edge bead of the previous wall instead of adding a new bead. Then proceed into the next edge bead of the floor. You will make the third wall just as the second one. Again, you string 4 core beads, add 1 edge bead in the first 2 gaps each, and in the third position you pass through the bead of the previous wall instead of adding a new one. Now you can see you have your first 3 walls done around the floor. We exit from the last edge bead of the floor. Here we string again 4 core beads, pass again through the bead we were exiting from. Then already in the first gap we have to go through the adjacent edge bead of the first wall, then go up into the second position where we add another edge bead. And in the third position, we will pass through the bead of the previous wall. Now we have to weave up to the top to exit from one of the edge beads on the open end. Then we string 4 more core beads and pass again through the bead we were exiting from. Flip the 4 core beads on the top, and then you pass again through the beads and always pass through the adjacent edge bead of the wall you're passing to connect the top to all 4 walls. Now your first cube is finished. You can see each wall of the cubes has 4 core beads and the 4 edge beads around. I call these edge beads because actually they mark the edge of your cube, not the corner. The corner of the cube is where you can see the 3 green beads. Don't mix that up. If you want to add a second unit now, it's easy. You can just start from one of the edge beads on the top, string 4 new core beads for the first wall, pass again through the bead you were exiting from, and then reinforce the core beads to add the edge beads for that first wall. Now you add the edge beads in the first, second and third position. And after that you will proceed to the next floor bead. Again, for the second wall, you string your 4 core beads and then add the edge beads into the first 2 positions. In the third position, you will pass through the edge bead of the previous wall instead of adding a new one. It's always the same. The third wall is just done as the second wall. You string your 4 core beads. It's getting a bit boring, it's always 4 beads. And then you add your edge beads in the outline in the first 2 positions. Pull it tight, and in the third position you will pass through the previous unit. In the third position you will pass through the adjacent bead of the previous unit, and then you proceed into the last floor bead. For the last wall, you string your 4 core beads, then you attach it to the left and the right to your previous wall. Add 1 bead in the top position and then pass through the adjacent bead of the first wall. Flippy things here. Now the lid is missing. String your 4 core beads and attach them to the 4 walls around. Now you have finished your second cube, and as you can see, you have 2 cubes next to each other. The first one is a little bit looser than the second. This is often happening with the first cube. You can reinforce the beads here. The connection between these 2 cubes is quite sturdy. It's way more sturdy than cubic right angle weave, but of course you have more thread passes. Now, instead of just adding another double CRAW unit, just have a look at these 4 core beads. These 4 core beads are too inviting to just add a classical cubic right angle weave unit on top. Therefore, we string 3 beads, pass again through the bead we're exiting from, and then proceed into the next core bead. We ignore the edge beads here, string 2 beads, pass through the bead of the previous unit and the one we're exiting from. Then we repeat this for the third wall, just as you know from cubic right angle weave. And then in the last position, we step up into the first wall before we add the one missing bead on top. Now we just pass through the 4 beads on top to get them connected, and your little cube is finished. If you want to continue with double CRAW, you will just add your edge beads in between your 4 core beads, and magic, here you have the new floor for your next double CRAW unit. Here you can see I added another double CRAW unit on top, so in the slimmer section we have the CRAW unit and the double CRAW unit on top. Adding this CRAW unit in between makes the whole thing more flexible. If you want to make a bangle or a bracelet, it's more suitable like this, especially when you work with larger beads. As you can see here, I made a flat piece where I used double CRAW and CRAW units alternating in some kind of grid. This is giving the whole piece a bit more flexibility, as you can see, and it has a nice look when you play with colors. But of course also here the flexibility has its limits. You can see also with the CRAW unit in between, the stitch is quite sturdy. In this sample, I was using size 11 seed beads, and I just made a zigzag line, 5 cubes in one direction, 3 cubes in the other direction. And then later on top, I added some bicones just to give it a bit bling. For the structure itself, you don't need to add the bicones. You can see it's a quite nice design. In this sample, I was using size 8 beads again, alternating CRAW and double CRAW units. You can see the brown beads here. These are the core beads, and the green beads around, they are the edge beads. Just in the equator line where there's no beads attached, I use drop beads instead of size 8 beads, so that gives it a nice look. And here for this little flower, I was playing with different sizes of beads in the stitch. You can see it's a quite sturdy piece, and I can tell you even without the bicones on front it will be. I was using size 15 beads in the inner arc and size 11s on the outer side. So that alone gives it this blossom shape. The arcs are connected in a right. I added a rivel in the center because otherwise you would have been able to flip the arcs inside out. But as I said, it was sturdy enough only from the stitch itself. Now I heard some people saying that this stitch looks like chenille stitch. Yes, it does on the first sight, but there's one major difference between the stitches. In chenille stitch, all your beads are in the same direction, means your filling beads, the single beads in between, they all go in horizontal direction. When you use double CRAW instead, you will have your filling beads in all 4 directions, means you can continue in a cube version, which you can't do with chenille stitch. What both stitches have in common is the fact that they work with double step stitches, means you could say chenille stitch is a double step version of netting, and double CRAW is a double step version of CRAW. So I hope the video helped you a little bit, and I hope you enjoy the stitch as much as I do.